Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you and welcome to today's edition of the Goldie Show. I'm your host, Goldie Ghamari. My apologies for not starting at the regular time. Today has been a very interesting day, a little bit busy, so I do apologize for starting late. Tomorrow as well, I'm going to be starting later because I do have an appointment at 12 noon. But thank you for your patience and thank you for being here. A big shout out to all of the mods on the YouTube channel. A big shout out to the subscribers. And of course, a big shout out to all of my channel members. And don't worry, we will be doing a members only live stream after party when I'm done here. So stick around for that as well. So today we are going to watch an interview that is incredibly important because it's going to explain a lot about this unholy alliance between Islam and communism. And for those of you who have watched my live streams where we speak about Iran and the 1979 Islamic Revolution, you are very familiar with how the communists and progressives and woke left actually enabled the Islamists and helped them destabilize Iran and then eventually take over. And then once the Islamic dictatorship took over, of course, then they went and they murdered everyone on the left as well. So there is unfortunately a close connection between communism and Islamism. And even though these two ideologies you would think don't necessarily mix, but they are united in their anti-imperialist rhetoric and narrative. And that is why even today, you are seeing all of these communists and woke leftist progressives and Antifa who are joining the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine movements because again it's rooted in their anti-imperialist ideology. That's pretty much where the unity ends. But again, for those who are not familiar, this is going to be a very, very good good talk today. And we're featuring someone named Asra Nomani. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Asra a few years ago when she came to town, and she was part of a panel and she was speaking about this. So, who is Asra Nomani? She is an Indian American journalist and author. Born in India to Muslim parents, she earned a BA from West Virginia University in Liberal Arts in 1986 and an MA from the American University in International Communications in 1990. Nomani is the author of 3 books: Standing Alone, An American Woman's Struggle for the Soul of Islam, Tantrika, Traveling the Road of Divine Love, and the book that's very interesting, Woke Army, the Red-Green Alliance that is destroying America's freedom. So let's just dive right in and get started.
How, why, and when did radical Islam and the left unite into an unholy alliance? Who started it? Who funded it? What were the parameters? Who are the enemies? And where is it headed? That's what we'll discuss today.
And I lived during the feminist movement. I absorbed the very important principles of classic liberalism, free speech, women's rights, equal rights, human rights, such simple ideas. Well, the orthodoxy in Islam does not believe in any of those ideas. They believe in blasphemy laws. They believe in talaq, 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 3 declarations of I divorce you, and a man is divorced from a woman. They do not believe that a non-Muslim is equal to a Muslim. So these are such fundamental violations of classic liberal ideas. But in my lifetime in the United States, I have been so disappointed watching the left and even liberals, and now even the Democratic Party, abandon these ideas. But many did not. And they were coming from Muslim organizations with names like Tablighi Jamaat, the missionaries, the Ikhwan Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, these Muslims who believe in political Islam, who believe in an Islam that should run the country, an Islam where the law of the land should be Islamic. And that was the 1980s as critical race theory is developing. These men established organizations in the United States, an entire network. I live in Northern Virginia. They started an entire hub at this building at 500 Grove Street in Herndon, Virginia. And there they created this alphabet soup of organizations with names like Islamic Society of North America, Muslim Students Association, Council on American Islamic Relations. The Saudi government had sent suitcases of this Quran. Now, it is actually a blasphemy in my eyes to put this interpretation out in the world. And you can see here, who is it coming from? What's the city?
Medina. Okay.
So this is coming literally from the government of the Saudi Arabia, and they call it the Noble Quran, right? All of a sudden, they started using words against me like munafiq, which is it's a smear worthy of a death sentence.
What does it mean?
Hypocrite.
Hypocrite.
And it means that you have deceived your religion. And this is a lethal word, but they used it as I started to confront them over the last. This is my battle because I'm a Muslim. As somebody, even in my family, we know 14 generations ago that on my father's side, our ancestor was named Thakur Suraj Singh, a really great Muslim name, right?
Thakur Suraj Singh. Which state did they know roughly?
Yes, we know exactly where he lived. He lived in village of Bindwal, outside of Azamgarh, in Azamgarh district.
In Uttar Pradesh.
In Uttar Pradesh.
So 14 generations ago,
we know this story.
You were Hindus.
Yes.
Namaste. So we're going to do one more episode, Asra and myself. We already introduced her as a very important voice for feminism within Islam. a person, the person who was very close to Daniel Pearl in Islamabad and in Karachi before he died. The very famous saga of what happened to this important Wall Street Journal journalist who went to Pakistan to cover and got into some investigative details about some bad guys. And so then they managed to kidnap him and kill him and all that. And so she was the person there who knows the whole thing and uncovered it, helped the investigators get to the bottom of it. And she was a friend of his for a very long time. And as a result of that trauma, she changed her posture towards Islam. This is what we discussed in a previous episode. What I want to talk about now is something completely different. Islam has an alliance with the left. That's a very important thing to talk about. There is a term, Islamo-leftism, hyphenated.
Yes.
So that's a very interesting term. So, and I want to talk about.
I also refer to it as Islamo-Marxism, and in fact, we even have unfortunately, in Iran, there is an Iranian Islamo-Marxist communist group. It's called the MEK, the Mujahideen. The MEK are actually even more hated by Iranians than the Islamic dictatorship itself, and the MEK was instrumental in helping the Islamic dictatorship overthrow the Shah and impose Sharia law on everyone. And as soon as they were successful in doing that, the Islamic dictatorship turned around and then they began murdering the MEK as well. Now, of course, we Iranians, I mean, we see the MEK as traitors, so they built their own bed and they can lay in it. But yeah, there's a reason that for us Iranians, we reject communism, we reject Islamism, because we have seen how it led to the downfall of Iran in 1979.
I'll give you my research and all that and get your ideas on it. And we'll both compare notes on that. And then.
Oh, Canadian says it started with the Jadids. The Jadids? Let's see. The Jadid movement or Jadidism, let me see what you're saying here. So, a Turco-Islamic modernist political, religious, and cultural movement in the Russian Empire in the late 19th and early 20th century. I mean, okay, so that's definitely one of them. There were also smaller Islamo-Marxist groups in occupied Iran as well. But wow, this is very interesting. I did not know this. Okay, let me just pull this up for everyone. Thank you for sharing this, Canadian. I'm going to look into this some more. Wait, let me just pull this up so people can see here. Okay. Let me just remove this. This is why I love doing live streams, because we all get an opportunity to learn new things. And so I'm just now, I'm very familiar with the Islamo-Marxist movement when it comes to Iran, but I'm not as familiar with Islamo-Marxist movements elsewhere. So this is very interesting. Okay, so the Jadid movement or Jadidism was a Turco-Islamic modernist political, religious, and cultural movement in the Russian Empire in the late 19th and early 20th century. They normally refer to themselves by the Tatar terms Tariq Parvarlar, Zialar, or simply Yoshlar. The Jadid movement advocated for an Islamic social and cultural reformation through the revival of the pristine Islamic beliefs and teachings while simultaneously engaging with modernity. That's really interesting. You know, that's kind of a little bit similar to the Islamo-Marxist movement that began in Iran, the MEK, the Mujahideen Khalq. They were also funded and inspired and basically created with the help of the Soviets back in the day as well. So that's interesting. I'm going to look into that. Let me make a note on this. I'm going to look into that, and I might even make like a short video about that. Jadid movement. Communism and Islamism. Wow, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Major, Pahlavism needs to be a thing again. Oh, it is. It is. I would say that at this point, like at least 80% of Iranians in occupied Iran want the Shah to return and want to go back to the constitutional monarchy that we had prior to 1979. I'm actually working on a video that's hopefully I'm going to be able to release it later today. I'm working on a video with the newest protests coming out of occupied Iran, where Iranians are in the streets and they are chanting, "Long live the king, we want the king to return." So keep an eye out for that. That video is going to come out later today for sure. Doraemon, good morning, everyone. What are your thoughts on newly opened metro station completely dedicated to Mary and Jesus, i.e. Maryam and Muqaddas, and complete absence of any Islamic scriptures of anything? So that's basically the way that the Islamic dictatorship, right? Wait, let me just... So what the Islamic dictatorship did with that is they're basically trying to placate the rest of the world by trying to claim that, oh, look, like we're so tolerant that we have a metro station dedicated to Maryam Muqaddas. However, as I explained in my video that I just posted about Christianity, Christians are being persecuted. In fact, just last week, another 5 Iranians who had recently converted from Islam to Christianity were jailed for the crime of being Christian, and they were jailed for speaking about Christianity online and attending an underground church because the Islamic dictatorship accused them of being a risk to national security for literally being Christian. So these are how dictatorships operate. They portray a front to the rest of the world, and they do that in order to make people think that, oh, look, Iran is normal and everyone is free or whatever. So yeah, they built this metro station as a way to try and convince people who know nothing about Iran that the Islamic dictatorship is fine and everything is normal. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're going around and they're persecuting Christians. So I mean, I can pull up that article here. So I actually just shared it. I just shared it in my video, but here, I'll pull it up again. 5 Christians jailed. Here we go. So this is literally an article from 5 days ago. Here, let me pull this up for you so you can see. So this is from December 17, 2025. 5 Iranian Christian converts sentenced to stiff prison terms. And these are, 4 of the converts here. So a seriously ill Iranian Christian convert who broke her spine in Evin prison. Guys, Evin prison is the worst prison in occupied Iran. Evin prison is basically a political prison. So you only have political prisoners there, right? So these are people who are basically being jailed for speaking out against the Islamic Republic, or like it's not a jail for criminals. It's a political prison, and people are tortured, they're raped, they're executed there. It's a horrifying place to be. And just the first sentence here: a seriously ill Iranian Christian convert who broke her spine in Evin prison is among 5 Christians handed combined prison terms totaling more than 50 years, a rights group said. The national security offenses for which they were convicted involve house church worship and Christian activity online, according to UK-based rights group Article 18. House church leader Joseph Shahbazian, his wife Lida, Nasir Navard Goltepe, another woman whose name has not been disclosed, and Aida Najaflu were sentenced, it added. All except Lida Shahbazian, who received 8 years, were sentenced to 10 years. At least 2, including Najaflu, received an additional 5 years for gathering and collusion. So again, the fact that the Islamic dictatorship opened up a subway station with an image of Maryam Moradas, Mary, it means absolutely nothing, because again, you also have to remember that Muslims do say that, you know, they believe in Jesus and they believe in the Virgin Mary. However, they've twisted the narrative around, and so Muslims, even though they claim that they believe in Jesus, they actually don't, because for Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, whereas Muslims don't say that. Muslims say that he was just like another prophet. Muslims do not believe that Jesus died for their sins. So I mean, there are religious theologians who've actually spoken about this topic, and how they've explained how the Jesus in Islam is not the same person in Christianity, and that the Jesus in Islam is like a totally different, you know, person or whatever. So if you're interested, I can find someone who's spoken about that, and I can share that video in one of my future live streams to explain the difference. But for us Iranians, we already know that what the Islamic dictatorship did, like, it's just a front. It's just basically a way to appease people who know nothing about Iran, and to think that, oh, look, Iran is so progressive, they're putting up an image of Mary. But what the Islamic dictatorship is doing is they put up an image of the Islamic version of Mary, and it's according to what the Quran says about her. It has nothing to do with Christianity, but that's how they fool people, right? So very, very good question. I'm glad you asked that, and I will make a note to find a video that speaks about the difference there between Isa, as they call him in the Quran, versus Jesus as he's referred to in the Bible. So let me make a note of that, and we'll continue. Thank you so much for the comment and the question. Appreciate that.
Whether that alliance is authentic, right, or whether it's actually full of contradictions.
Yes.
And what are some of the contradictions?
Right.
And then we'll talk about, what to do about it.
Yeah.
So, because you have done a lot in
We're
that.
going to figure it out.
You're going to figure it out.
Know.
So we're going to explore that.
Yeah.
There are several deep, irreconcilable contradictions between Orthodox radical Islam on the one hand and the leftist agenda on the other hand.
Yeah.
But these seem to have been covered up in some kind of a unholy alliance.
Yes.
And it's important to figure out why this alliance happened and what are the contradictions in it.
Right.
So I want to just compare notes with you.
Yeah.
So, one of the moments which is very important is 1970s, when the Shah of Iran, right, the Shah of Iran and his alliance with the United States is considered sort of the pinnacle of dictatorship, of dictatorial Islam on the one side, and capitalism, American capitalism, for the sake of oil. Mm-hmm. So this is a great story. They want to topple this. The leftists want to topple it, right, and some of these leftists are.
So I just want to clarify. So what he's saying here is, when he's talking about the Shah of Iran's alliance with the United States, and how that's like the epitome of like dictatorial whatever, that's the narrative that the Islamists and the communists were putting out there, right? So whenever you hear the jihadis and the communists claim that the Shah was a dictator, they say that because of their anti-imperialist rhetoric and narrative. The Shah was actually not a dictator. In fact, Iran was incredibly free. It was modern. It was secular. The only thing that was actually banned in Iran under the Shah was communism and Islamism. Why? Because the Shah recognized that both communism and Islamism are a threat to Western, modern, civilized democracies, right? In fact, Iran was a constitutional monarchy. We had a parliament. There was, 100% religious freedom. And yeah, communism was banned. And what's interesting is that only recently, just a few months ago, various countries in Europe passed legislation banning communism as well because they recognized the threat that communism poses to Western democratic society. So I just wanted to point that out as well here. So again, the rhetoric and the narrative of the Shah being a dictator is 100% false. It's been completely debunked. And if you want more information on that, go and take a look at my live streams where I talk about. Hello, 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 testing. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me now? Hello? Okay. Oh, that was bizarre. Okay, I had a random mic issue. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about that. Okay. Um wow. Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know, guys. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay, so um like I was saying, if you want to learn about the 1979 Islamic Revolution, and if you want to understand how the communists and the Islamists pushed propaganda in order to justify um, taking over Iran, you want to go to my YouTube um, webpage and you scroll down to so it's my playlist. It's my playlist called Iranians Rate Documentaries About Iran, and go to the first one here. So the first one, 1979 Islamic Revolution, The Last Persian Shah. It has a rating of 3 out of 10. The documentary itself is about 1 hour long, and I provide 3 hours of commentary. So to learn more about what actually caused the Islamic uh, republic to take over, go and take a look at that. But everything that you think you know about the Shah and the Shah being a dictator, it's literally all nonsense. It's all propaganda. It's all BS. Unfortunately, there's a lot of jihadis and communists and anti-imperialists who like to push the narrative that the Shah was a dictator. But Iranians, like, they don't care. In fact, 80% of Iranians want the Shah to return. We know the truth. And I'm not going to constantly defend that, but I have made videos about it in the past, and I will continue to make videos about that in the future. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, go just check out this playlist if you want to learn more about that. Um, someone said what I think of Rita Panahi. I love Rita Panahi. She's amazing. She's interviewed me a few times. So yeah, she's fantastic. To the person who asked me what I think about the IDF, the IDF is fantastic. I'm a big supporter of the IDF and everything they do. All right, let's get back to the show.
England, and they're hatching plots against it, and some of them are in France.
Right.
And of course, the Islamic mullahs want to topple it,
Yeah.
because Shah of Iran is a bad guy.
Right.
So there's a common enemy. There's a common enemy there,
Yeah.
and the term Islamo-leftism gets in circulation, and according to the Wikipedia article, it's of Persian origin, this kind of term. There was a Persian equivalent, and then it became known as Islamofascism. So it seems that one of the starting points was the Iranian Revolution, which brought these two anti-capitalism, anti-US forces together.
Common enemy.
Common enemy.
Right,
That's one
right.
thing. And then the other thing is that France became a place where a lot of Muslim immigrants were going.
Right.
So the left was losing its traditional constituency, which is the proletariat, the poor people, the white masses. They were no longer into this communism and all that because of forces of capitalism, free market,
Yeah.
other kinds of politics in France.
So Canadian says Turkish Jadids formed the Young Turks, then committed the Armenian genocide. Turk Cenk Uyghur is a progressive and named his channel Young Turks. Yeah, it's actually kind of sick how he named his channel after a group that committed genocide. And I've been meaning to make a video about the Armenian genocide as well. In fact, a lot of Armenians came to Iran and found refuge in Iran during the Armenian genocide. And I think it's disgusting that there's a show called The Young Turks. I mean, that's like the equivalent of like naming a show, I don't know, The Young Nazis or something. Like, it's just the reference there, the reference to the Armenian genocide is kind of disgusting.
So the left started looking at immigrants as a source of power, as a source of their sustenance, because there weren't enough born white French people who were following them.
Right.
So this alliance also has that component in it,
Yeah.
that Muslim immigrants into France were easy to collaborate with from the left side.
Right.
As far as the Muslims are concerned, the Muslims found that the leftists were easier to deal with. They were more open to talk about them because they were also talking about oppression,
Right.
and Islam is full of this idea of victimhood, this idea that that you have to overthrow something. And one more interpretation that I read quite a lot is that the leftists found that Islam can be turned into violence, and they learned that in the Iranian Revolution, and they learned that it lends itself, it has the ingredients in itself because there is this idea of revolution there, and the leftists also have this idea of revolution. So each side started thinking they're going to use the other.
Right.
The Muslims, they had this dictator, the Shah, and they wanted to overthrow him. They didn't have the means to do it, and they need somebody else to help them. And lo and behold, this somebody else is the left that also hates America. So it's interesting, and they feel that they're using the left to help spread Islam. That the left will help them dismantle the order, the existing order, and then it'll pave the way for Islam.
Right.
But the left has its own ideas that they're using the Muslims as useful idiots, some of them called, that we're using these guys to overthrow and create problems and revolutionize and all that. and they'll kill each other.
Right.
But in the end, we'll have a kind of a world, order of communism or left kind of stuff.
They each think they'll prevail.
Each thinks that we're kind of using the other as a tactical thing.
Right.
Now, what do you think of this artificial alliance that these two brought about?
Yeah, I think about the faces of the women of Iran who were living before the mullahs came in 1979 and took power. They were women who were living like I am, with their hair free, walking freely in society. And unfortunately, in that movement, they aligned with the Islamists, as we call them. We call the Muslims, like my father and my mother, who practice Islam in their private life. And then we have this new term of the Islamists, right? Muslims who believe in political Islam, who believe in theocracy. So there was the Ayatollah Khomeini living in Paris, sending his propaganda to the world. And unfortunately, the feminists and the leftists, they fell for this alliance, and they were the first ones to become shackled and executed and murdered by the theocrats. Because who won? The Muslim theocrats won. And now, how many years later, 4 decades later, the society still lives with the Muslim extremists.
So the question here is, Islam had its own feminist movement at the time.
Yes.
That's what you're referring to, in Iran and places like that.
Yes, in India.
But the left,
Pakistan.
right, betrayed that.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point that has to be. Has the left faced this and confronted it and acknowledged that they, in the name of this alliance with Islam, actually the people who got slaughtered were the women.
Yeah, the women were slaughtered, and
Yes.
then they too were slaughtered because
Yes.
nobody is safe, you
Right.
know. And so they were making a deal, like you said, thinking that they would be the final victors, but they are still imprisoned or dead. Now, what's happened today, 4 decades later, is that the women of Iran are fighting for very simple ideas: woman, life, freedom, zan, zindagi, azadi. And those principles have been betrayed by the far left. And not only the far left, but liberals and Democrats in the United States.
I mean, we're actually fighting for more than that. We're fighting for more than women, life, freedom. We're fighting to just overthrow the regime. And in fact, the more popular slogan now has become Javid Shah, which means long live the king. And این آخرین نبرد پهلوی برمیگرده. So that translates to, this is the last battle, Pahlavi will return. So the movement has changed. The movement has grown. Today, Iranians in occupied Iran, they're not chanting Zan Zindagi Azadi anymore. It's gone beyond that. They are instead chanting, long live the king. We want the king to return. We want Pahlavi to return. So, I mean, that's what's actually happening. This interview is from 2023. So that's why she's still referring to woman, life, freedom. But, a lot has changed in the last 2 years. And I have, put up videos and I've shown videos. I'm actually making another video today where I'm going to be showing the anti-Islam demonstrations happening in occupied Iran and the fact that Iranians are calling for their king to return to Iran. So I just wanted to contextualize that because this interview is from almost 2 years ago, or over 2 years ago.
States, because they have perpetuated this unholy alliance.
So the alliance with Orthodox Islam takes precedence over liberalism's
Yes.
honest, true, claimed ideas that they've claimed. They've compromised those. It means there's a hypocrisy.
Such a hypocrisy. Like, I came to the United States at a young age, at the age of 4, and I lived during the feminist movement. I absorbed the very important principles of classic liberalism: free speech, women's rights, equal rights, human rights, such simple ideas.
Oh, so I just wanted to share another really important chant. Gandalf, he's not a member, but Gandalf is in occupied Iran. Always great to have Gandalf here. So always great for our viewers to hear from, Iranians in occupied Iran. And you're absolutely right. So another popular chant is Ey Shah Iran Bargard be Iran, which means O Shah of Iran, return to Iran. So 100% right. That's another one.
Well, the orthodoxy in Islam does not believe in any of those ideas. They believe in blasphemy laws. They believe in talaq, 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 three declarations of I divorce you, and a man is divorced from a woman. They do not believe that a non-Muslim is equal to a Muslim. So these are such fundamental violations of classic liberal ideas. But in my lifetime in the United States, I have been so disappointed watching the left and even liberals, and now even the Democratic Party, abandon these ideas when it comes to the Muslim establishment.
So let's come to that. Let's discuss this in detail. I want to roll back now. We discussed the rise of this left and Islam alliance in Europe. Now let's talk about United States also. I think United States undergoes something very interesting, which few people realize, and that is Marxism arrives here after World War II.
Right.
Because of Marcuse, Herbert Marcuse and people like that. And previously, Marxism was economic. It was talking about haves and have-nots based on economic categories, not race and not religion.
Right.
And so what they did in the United States is they found out that Americans do not want to fight capitalism and free market, and the economic argument doesn't work.
Right.
So they reinvented, put Marxism in a new bottle with a new packaging, and they turned it into race, haves and have-nots.
Right.
So this is actually a very big turning point, which stays underground for a while.
Yeah.
So critical legal studies starts between 1977 and 82 in places like Harvard in a very serious way. And this is the study of American law as being unjust and biased towards blacks, against blacks and so on, with a lot of merit, a lot of good points they made, which I sympathize with. And this business about from the very origins of the United States, there is a sort of white supremacy built into structures, and these structures are hidden. They're not always visible.
Right.
And so the invisibility of white supremacy is part of this whole thing. And then this turns into critical race theory.
Yeah.
Now, this is all Marxism, because it deals with oppressors versus oppressed. It deals with grand narratives that have to be deconstructed. It deals with thesis and antithesis. There is no compromise. You have to destroy. It is total dismantlement. All that is is the Marxist view being expressed, but now in terms of race. So now it gives the anti-racism a very intellectually respectable theory, a theoretical framework. Now it's no longer just activists doing things, but there is a theory behind it. You can teach it in universities, you can get PhDs, you have professors in Harvard and all that who are into this area. So now this respectability of critical race theory in academic circles becomes important. But it remains academic until George Floyd. And then that really erupts the whole thing. Because now everybody is sympathetic.
Right.
And so this sympathy for the plight of the blacks is a big opening, and that door opens, and in comes this whole critical race theory to kind of come up with a theoretical foundation to explain all this. And America buys it. It starts getting taught everywhere. The media takes over. So this is sort of a very interesting thing, the Marxist takeover of America.
Right.
Now, this is particularly important. There are certain seeds being planted during the Obama administration, which is before Floyd.
Yes.
And you should talk about it. And also the Democratic Party get hijacked.
Yeah.
The whole Democratic Party, the progressive wing, which is what's running the show now, has turned into this and what is popularly called woke.
Yeah, and so while you've got this Marxism becoming hijacked and used with different goals and objectives in the United States, you have another parallel movement happening. And, you know, my father came to America in the 1960s, and so did many other Muslims. My father refused government funding from overseas, from governments like Saudi Arabia, Qatar later, even Pakistan.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but many did not. And they were coming from Muslim organizations with names like Tablighi Jamaat, you know, the missionaries, the Ikhwan Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, these Muslims who believe in political Islam, who believe in an Islam that should run the country, an Islam where the law of the land should be Islamic. And that was the 1980s as critical race theory is developing. These men establish organizations in the United States, an entire network. I live in Northern Virginia. They started an entire hub at this building at 500 Grove Street in Herndon, Virginia. And there they created this alphabet soup of organizations with names like Islamic Society of North America, Muslim Students Association, Council on American Islamic Relations. But the thing is, these Muslims were practicing an interpretation of Islam that was not very compatible with liberal ideas. And I have one example for you.
Please.
Okay, so I want to show you what I grew up with.
Okay.
Okay, this was the Islam, while we got critical race theory emerging, this is the Islam, this is an actual Quran that was brought to my hometown mosque in Morgantown, West Virginia. So I'm going to show you. First, this is Surah Al-Fatiha, okay?
Okay, let me read it.
Okay, great, read it.
Okay, this is not the first time I've read the Quran, by the way.
Okay.
I have a copy of the Quran, Princeton University Press.
That's right, that's right.
I don't know whether it's you agree with it or disagree,
Right.
but it's considered a Princeton University Press
Yeah.
production. And I read it from time to understand. So this is all the praises and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of the Alamin, the most beneficent, the most merciful, the only owner of the day of recompense. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Guide us to the straight way.
And can I just stop you for a
Yeah,
second?
yeah.
Because I just want to stop on that sentence, because my mother taught me this chapter. This is the first chapter that we learn as Muslim children. And what a nice idea, right? Guide us on the straight way. Simple idea. What parent doesn't want to teach that to children, right? So it's a very universal concept. Okay, but keep reading now.
But I want to ask you.
Yeah.
So it says that you alone we worship. Now
Right.
the word alone means exclusivity.
Yes.
Okay, so now the question is, the huge billion-dollar question is, when I worship Krishna,
Right.
okay,
Exactly.
is it the same entity?
Exactly.
Okay, or not?
And then can I ask you this?
Okay.
When you look at that, how is alone in there? How is it?
You alone is in parentheses.
It's in parentheses.
Yeah, but that means that it is available for interpretation.
Exactly.
So you can put it there or not put it there.
And they have put it there.
Yeah,
Okay.
they put it there.
They
so,
put it
so
there.
So the fact that a large interpretation of Islam throughout its history has claimed Allah and Allah alone.
Right.
So the question is Krishna and Allah, is Allah just a new name because Krishna is much older?
Right. Or is it punishable?
Or is it not? Because if
Right. If is it not, and is it then? I mean,
It's kind of like veering away from the topic of communism now. So, I mean, I hope they kind of get back on track here, because like when it gets to the theological parts of it, that's just like, I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in the practical aspects of it when it comes to the unholy alliance between Islamism and communism. So maybe they'll get back on track. Let's see.
when you go into the most illiberal of ideas, is it something that ISIS can justifiably kill somebody who does not practice it?
The issue of what to be done comes later.
Yeah.
The first issue is it the same or not?
Right.
Because if you're worshiping Allah and I'm worshiping, say, Krishna,
Right.
and we are both worshiping the one person who is the supreme person, but you call him Allah and I call him Krishna. if these are different,
Right.
then the question comes what to do about.
And so we know that oftentimes the Muslim apologists will say, oh, the monotheistic religions, at least, we all come from the same Abraham, right? So let's make it even simple, your question, and let's say, does you alone even include Jews and Christians? Let's ask that as a first question.
That's a much simpler
Much
question.
simpler, right?
But mine is more complex
Yeah.
because not only is it non-Abrahamic,
Right.
but the description of Krishna is not the same at all.
Right. And then you add to it
All
not
the
only
different
Krishna,
forms, all the
but
different
Durga,
forms.
and right.
Innumerable forms
Right.
of the one.
Right.
Innumerable forms and intelligences and shaktis
Right.
that are all characteristic of that one.
Yes.
So we have a very profound theology which says that ultimate reality is of course one, but it has a whole lot of forms and manifestations, and different ones appeal to different people.
Yes.
And you could be connected with a particular one and I could be connected with a different one. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
So the way this lends itself
Right.
is for a radical person to dismiss me as being illegitimate.
Exactly. That's what they allow here. Now let's keep reading.
Okay.
So now it's going to get very interesting
Okay.
for you, okay? So there you are, and you've said that you alone we worship, okay, and then keep going.
And you alone we ask for help for each and everything.
Okay.
Guide us to the straight way.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So the way of those on whom you have bestowed your grace.
Wonderful, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's turn the page, and dun dun dun. What does it say?
Not the way of.
And the way is again in parentheses, so they've added it.
Those who earned your anger.
Period. That's it. Those who earned your anger. That's how it ends.
Okay.
Okay. But now, what have they added?
Such as the Jews.
There you go.
Not of those who went astray, such as the Christians.
They added. And how is such as the Jews? In parentheses. How is such as the Christians?
But
In
also the
parentheses.
Hindus and the
then
Buddhists.
Dorman, when non-Muslims get persecuted, why are these human rights organizations silent? But when something happens to Muslims, they cry Islamophobia, etc. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Yeah, why is that? Why is it that you never hear about non-Muslims who are being persecuted and murdered by Muslims in the mainstream media? It's a very good question. I don't have an answer for that. It's something that we Iranians have been struggling with for the last 47 years because we have been we've literally being murdered on a daily basis by the Islamic dictatorship, in the name of Allah and Islam and jihad, and you don't usually hear about that in the media. In fact, what you get instead is that when we Iranians call it out, we're accused of Islamophobia and spreading hate for literally exposing that we are being murdered under Sharia law. It's the world is upside down these days.
that's why I said
everybody else.
That's why I said you don't even mention the complex question of the Hindus and the Buddhists. They can't even accept the Christians. This Quran, I got this literal Quran from my mosque in Morgantown, West Virginia, because the Saudi government had sent suitcases of this Quran. Now, I told you the Saudi government, I gave you a clue.
So what is clever is this use of parentheses.
Right.
So that when you get in trouble, the Saudi guy who's teaching all this can say, oh, no, the parentheses, you don't worry about it.
Right. And
but then when the cameras are not there,
Yeah.
or when the Westerners are not looking, and he has the audience of his own people,
Yes.
he can radicalize them by including what's in the parentheses. So you can include the parentheses, radical idea, exclusivity idea, hate idea, or you can exclude it by saying it's parenthetical when you want to be politically correct.
Yeah, and that's how they fool the
So
left
is this
and
called
the liberals.
al-taqiyya? You know what al-taqiyya
Yes,
is?
I do know what it is, and the al-taqiyya is deception.
Deception that says
lies.
basically it says that when you are in a minority,
Yeah.
or when you are on the back foot, then use al-taqiyya to be very nice and
Yeah,
to
it is, and we have to be honest about that, and that's why I think it's really important to walk around with this Quran and say this is a part of our problem, and it is actually a blasphemy in my eyes to put this interpretation out in the world. And you can see here, who is it coming from? What's the city?
Medina.
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 So
Okay.
this is coming literally from the government of the Saudi Arabia, and they call it the Noble Quran, right? So this is just
And it's by this professor
right.
somewhere,
PhD, this,
professor
that.
of Islamic faith and teachings, Islamic University, etc., etc.
So this is such an illiberal idea. And this is one in which this alphabet soup of organizations, they have been accepting money from these governments that have been putting these very illiberal ideas. And we know this, like our common sense. We see that women were not allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia for so many years. Somebody can come from India and be a laborer, but are they allowed citizenship? You know, they're denied fundamental human rights. And then women do not get the equal rights treatment.
So I want to ask you, is it true that the surahs written in Makkah and the ones written in Medina are different in the sense that one are really beautiful love for humanity and so on, and the other are about warfare?
It is true. And
is it that because in one situation Muhammad faced enemies, he needed to organize people and make a military training out of it, kind of a military doctrine for fighting purposes, and in the other case he was more things were peaceful around, there was nobody to fight, and so there was more about harmony within. Is that reasonable?
So but it was there in Mecca that the Prophet Muhammad was first doing his proselytizing. So he needed to have an attractive religion.
Narungo, thank you for keeping us well informed. Thank you so much. Thank you for the support. Guys, I'm actually just preparing another video to share with you that's going to talk more about the unholy alliance between Islamism and communism. And that relates specifically to Iran, because I'm just taking a look at this video and it seems like only the first like 10, 15 minutes was about the unholy alliance of Islamism and communism. And then, of course, they were speaking about Iran because that's like the big example here. So I don't think they're going to be talking about that anymore, which is unfortunate because this interview is literally titled Rise of the Islamic Leftist Unholy Alliance. So I thought that the whole thing was going to be about that, but it's obviously not here. So I'm just getting that document, or sorry, that video prepared so I can share that with you. But let's see here how long that's going to take. Okay, we're still working on that. But a lot of you, so while we're waiting for that that video to get ready, I was thinking that perhaps we could, because a lot of you have been asking me to do this. So while we're waiting for that video to get ready, maybe what I'll do is I will play Tulsi Gabbard's warning against Islamist ideology. Let me see how long it's going to take for that video. Yeah, that video is going to take a while to get. Actually, wait, let me see if I have it in my downloads already. Give me one moment, guys. I might have it. Let's see here. Pahlavi CFR, Natcon. Oh, here we go. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's see if this is the video. Oh, perfect. Okay. All right. I have it. So let me just cancel that. Okay. So I'm going to pull up another video. that speaks about the unholy alliance between the red and the black, and it explains exactly what was going on and what happened in occupied Iran, and how communism and Islamism worked together to destabilize Iran. And that's exactly what's happening right now in Western countries. Okay, here we go.
Are Iranians? What do they say? What do they think? What are they capable of?
So this gentleman, he is the current Shah of Iran in exile. This is Reza Pahlavi II. He is the leader of the Iranian national opposition, and he is supported by like at least 80% of Iranians in Iran and around the world. So he's going to break it down perfectly for all of you, exactly what happened in occupied Iran.
Who are Iranians? What do they say? What do they think? What are they capable of?
Why revolution? Who do you believe was behind it? The CIA, the Russians, the Marxists? I've heard all kinds of theories.
I really believe that if the revolution had not happened, Iran should be by now South Korea of the Middle East.
Not
Instead,
the
we have
North
become
Korea.
the North Korea.
The new Iran. What does that look like?
There is a positive note to it. America might say, well, we want to leave them alone. They won't leave you alone. It has to be declawed. If not now, when? How many more generations have to be sacrificed?
Your Highness Crown Prince of Iran, welcome to PragerU. It is a great honor to have you here.
I'm very glad to be here today and talk to you and be on your program. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, this is going to be a fascinating conversation, and I have many questions for you. But I actually want to start by doing something that I typically don't do at the beginning of an interview, and that is to thank you. I will surely thank you at the end, but I feel like you deserve a thank you from many of my Iranian friends who I have here living in the United States, who expressed to me that you have given them so much hope. Not only have you given them hope that things will get better in Iran, in your country, but you have also been the embodiment of what Iranians are really. And for many Americans living in the United States, especially of my generation and younger, our experience with Iran has been terrorism and killing and death and terrible human rights abuses and the treatment of women, and what we've heard has happened to young women like Masha Amini. And so when we hear about that regime in Iran and we associate all of that evil, it's been a blessing to us to know people like you and like the Iranians who do live here in the United States, who, in my opinion, are some of the most reasonable people I know. They're incredibly kind. They're incredibly warm. Best food ever. Almost all of them are successful entrepreneur, totally rational people. And I just have such a huge love for the Iranian people that reconciling the huge difference between the Iranians that I know and people like you versus the Iranians that I hear about in the Middle East, it's I have a great sense of gratitude to people like you who've really held up what Iranians are about. And so I just want to start by just saying thank you. Thank you for everything you've already done.
Well, I'm just doing my job, and it's my duty to serve the best interests of my compatriots by at least being their voice to begin with, and hopefully then some.
And you have been. For people who know very little about Iran, it is the more you study Persia and the region, the more actually fascinating it becomes, because that region has given birth to so many different societies, I guess, in some ways. Can you describe to us what?
I just wanted to point out how hilarious I find it that trolls think that if they put a super chat where they're promoting the Islamic dictatorship, as if somehow that's gonna like come on, just magically appear on my live stream. I mean, you are obviously an idiot and a troll. And I just find it hilarious that you're wasting your money trying to troll and it's not working. But I mean, I guess Thank you for supporting my channel. Payande Iran Javid Shah.
What has happened over, let's say, the last 100 years or so, since your grandfather became the ruler and then your father, and what happened with you, and why did you end up in exile?
Mhm. Actually, when you look at the legacy, the way people now look upon what my grandfather and my father did as the architect of modern Iran, in fact, they call my family the Iran building family, demonstrates that the view was how we can bring Iran from the, sort of underdeveloped country where most people were uneducated, illiterate, to a country that in the 70s was thriving, had a strong economy. Iranians were educating themselves, were coming back to Iran to bring in whatever was necessary in terms of development and infrastructure. So I think it's really in the last 100 years, because my grandfather stepped into the scene towards the second quarter of the 20th century, 1926, more or less. And
I also just want to point out for everyone watching, I have actually done a live stream in the past with this particular interview, and I've gone over it and I've broken it down in detail. Let me just pull that up for you here so you guys can go back if you want to reference this, because a lot of the things he's saying right now, like I pause and I go through it and I provide, facts and proof and evidence, right? So if you want to see this particular live stream, it's in two parts. So just go to, if you want to see this, go to the Goldie Show, and you're going to scroll down. And where is it? It is, wait, where would I have that? Let me just find it. I had it here. Was the PragerU one? Or no? Let me see. Here we go. So it's King Reza Pahlavi is ready for regime change part 2. And then here you go. So if you want to watch the full interview where I live stream it and I speak about what he's saying, like I literally pause and then I fact check and I provide documents and evidence, go back and you could watch it in its entirety. So entirety, King Reza Pahlavi, Iran is ready for regime change. That's part 1. And then this is part 2 here. The only reason that I'm playing this video now is because I just want to get to the part where he talks about how the unholy alliance of the red and the black, Islamism and communism, worked together to destabilize Iran back in the 70s, and how we are seeing that same pattern again today in Western countries. So that's just a little bit of context there. All right, let's continue.
he served first as the commander of the armies, was prime minister, and then he was prompted into the scene as a result of the previous dynasty, sort of like shying away from carrying their responsibilities, and he was called upon to step in and sort of literally take over power. And in fact, my grandfather wanted to first establish a republic in Iran, based on the model of Ataturk that he admired a lot next door in Turkey. And interestingly enough, the clerics at the time and many of the people in the Iranian sort of elite were saying, it won't work here. You should, crown yourself as the next king and form the new dynasty, which is what he did. So that's how it all started. And so for about 50 years, the Pahlavi dynasty was in place until we reached the point where the revolution happened. And I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about that. So I think Iran really began to flourish when we started, especially post-Second World War, where we were able to start producing our oil and selling it at a higher price. We created enough revenue so you can start really spending it on copious projects of modernization, development, factories, dams, roads, schools, everything that was needed. And that's how we started getting some traction. And Iranians, at the time of my grandfather, Iran's income per capita was around $400. Towards the end, it was over 2,800, and it was sort of like really increasing. And so I think people saw that Iran is progressively on track for development, for prosperity, for people's life improving at every level. But I think the most important element that, especially now, in contrast to where Iran was and what it is under this regime, is how much was done, especially for the women in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And that would really happen at the time of my father. Of course, my grandfather was the first one to say that people should be free to wear the veil or not, the hijab issue. And of course, he led by example by having his own daughters go out in public without wearing it.
Just wanted to give a shout out to my mom. She's in the chat. Hi, Maman. I love you too. Hope you're having fun.
Any, veil. And that was one way to liberate women from having to be castigated into, that. And the symbolism of it is so obvious because even when Masa happened a year ago, you see how much that is a symbol of where we were. And women were integrated in all form or shape into not just members of society, but actual participant in governance. Iranian women achieved suffrage 4 years before the women in Switzerland did.
Wow.
There were family laws to protect families and women's rights. They were given opportunities to become ministers, judges, even serve in the armed forces. It was a completely different situation as opposed to what this regime has done and turned them into second-class citizens. So I think that's a little bit of modern history of where Iran started to go. And I really believe that if the revolution had not happened, Iran should be by now, if not the second Japan of the Middle East, but at least the South Korea of the Middle East.
Not
Instead,
the
we have
North
become
Korea.
the North Korea. So it's not the people that have changed or our resources being depleted. It's just the nature of the regime. And in fact, I'd like to take the opportunity, since you talk about Iran and Iranians, we feel sometimes very frustrated whenever something happens, media or political leaders say, Iran did this, Iran did that. I will urge you to help us correct that by saying, this is not Iran and Iranians. This is the regime in Iran. So it's the Islamic regime, not the Iranian people. That's one way to distinguish the aspiration of Iranians from the doing of the regime. That perception by itself is important. At the beginning, especially when the hostages were taken to the American embassy in Tehran, and of course Khomeini had just hit the scene, I remember during that time leading to the revolution, I was still in Reese Air Force Base in Lubbock, Texas. And I can already see that sense of hostility against Iranians who had no fault whatsoever just to be Iranian. My own wife, who was studying in school in the Bay Area, was beaten up by some of her classmates just because she was an Iranian. But I think we have come a long way. I think many Iranians, especially those living in the United States, and for Americans who have interacted, example yourself, with Iranians, by now should know the difference between what actual Iranians believe or think as opposed to what the regime is projecting as being, something that is totally alien to us in terms of values, in terms of beliefs, in terms of principles. And that's where all the problem started and continues to exist.
You describe Iran as this prosperous economic society, right? And the revolution happens. If people were happy in Iran, presumably they were doing well financially and things were growing, why revolution? Who do you believe was behind it? Was it really from within? Or was it Carter? Was it the UK? Was it the fight over oil? Was it the Russians, the Marxists? I mean, I've heard all kinds of theories on who took Iran down and why. And I'm curious, what do you believe is the truth?
Okay, so now this is the part where it's really important to pay attention, where he's going to speak about this unholy alliance between communism and Islamism and how they united in Iran in starting from the 50s. Actually, starting from the 50s, they united, and it took 20 years, almost 30 years, to destabilize Iran to the point where they were able to take over with the support of the West and Jimmy Carter and whatever. But pay attention to this part. This is this part is very, very important. Also, thank you to the trolls who keep on paying me. I mean, sure. Thanks for wasting your money.
Well, there were two major groups that were opposed to the way Iran was, the direction it had taken. Everything that I explained regarding women's rights and things that were happening, the clergy didn't look at that very favorably. And Khomeini, in fact, started everything when my father instigated the white revolution at the time that brought in all these elements. He was the first one to start speaking against it and build that sort of rejection by the Islamists or the fundamentalists there. On the other hand, you had the Marxist forces who didn't like this rapprochement with the West in general, and in their sort of anti-imperialist, anti-Western rhetoric, sort of partnered with the Islamists. And that was the root cause that brought about that moment where there were forces at play that took it to that level of leading to this revolution. And interestingly enough, I think that now the children of that generation who in 1957, Iranian calendar, 57, which is 1979, were part of it, turned back to their parents and said, what the hell were you thinking? What was lacking? The maximum we could argue might be that maybe in terms of political liberalization, we were not quite there yet, but we were going in that direction. And they were saying, well, a lot of reforms could have happened and we could have avoided having a revolution. But instead, we opted to bring in some cleric that we believed would be just a very benign, sort of symbolic leader retiring in the city of Qom and allowing for all these promised liberties. And instead, we ended up with what we have. And by the time we realized what it was too late. And contrary to that, there's been decades of insisting on bringing reform to a regime that is irreformable. So it's the sort of tragedy in all this is that the opportunity cost to Iran and Iranians has been huge in terms of these past 4.5 decades since the revolution. However, there is a positive note to it, as crazy as it may sound. But it is really in the sense of some of the cornerstones of liberty and justice and the rule of law in any democracy, and that is the separation of church from state. In other words, a secular system. I want to emphasize this point as strongly as I can, because I think from the point of view of Americans, when they look at the American Constitution, when they look at the fact that Thomas Jefferson was inspired by Cyrus the Great to build in those values of human rights and liberty into the American Bill of Rights and Constitution, there's something that has to do with the history of our country. And we are proud as descendants of Cyrus to be represented in that. But what can we do for ourselves? And how can we have the same system in our country? Because a lot of people say, well, Iran was a...
Sorry. So someone in the YouTube live stream made a very, very good comment. So they say Khomeini was sending over cassette tapes to Iran to brainwash the masses. When he came in, he banned cassettes and music 100%. That's exactly what he did. I mean, this is how the Islamists operate. They take advantage of the freedoms given to people in modern Western civilized countries. They take advantage of those freedoms to push and promote their radical jihadi ideology and to bring people over to their side. And then as soon as they get into power, they ban everything. And one of the reasons that they ban everything is because they don't want others to do to them what they have done to others, right? So Khomeini did that. I actually remember, as a child in Iran, this would have been, I think this would have been like in 1990, right? So in 1990, I remember like people were buying VHS and cassette tapes on the black market. It was even illegal to own a VHS player because the Islamic regime said that it's all haram and against Islam or whatever. So you're absolutely such an important comment there, that the Islamic regime banned the very thing that they used to brainwash people because they didn't want people to be able to get the real news or to fact check, right? But thankfully now because of social media and the internet, everyone in Iran knows exactly what happened and knows that 1979 was not a real revolution. It was, in fact, a coup d'etat that was orchestrated by the communists and the Islamists working together to promote their anti-imperialist, anti-Western narrative. And again, like no one in Iran says the Shah was a dictator. We know the truth. We know the truth. It's always the non-Iranians who put out that fake news propaganda. But if you actually go and you look at the facts, you'll see that it's the farthest thing from the truth. And yet, these non-Iranians push that narrative. However, Iranians, we know the truth. We've woken up to that truth. And that's why today, Iranians are calling for their Shah to return. They want to go back to that constitutional monarchy because now Iranians recognize and understand that the Shah was actually protecting them from the very same savages who ended up taking over the country in 1979.
Muslim country. How do we deal with these religious elements? Is this really what they are? Not. And in fact, Iran was perhaps one of the most secular countries in the region before the revolution. But we had to experience directly the consequences of a religious dictatorship. It's a little bit like the Inquisition in Europe that led to Enlightenment. And now you're talking about an Islamic Inquisition in Iran and what could happen post that. In terms of returning to our roots and a country where different religions lived together side by side for centuries. Mm-hmm. Christians, Zoroastrians, Jews, Baha'is, Muslims, and we never had issues until this regime emerged. And that's a very important lesson that Iranians had to learn the hard way, but puts us in the best possible position to navigate this challenge and land on solid grounds in the future once this regime is finally brought down.
So do you think that the people who voted for the revolution, were they duped? Is that what happened? Were they basically tricked? Was it that the Marxists and the Islamists came together and created this new version of politicized Islam that controlled the media and lied to people, and people didn't realize really what they're stepping into? Because it's almost like an oxymoron to combine Marxism with religious Islam, because Marxism is really not about religion. And so the marriage of those two seemed quite bizarre, except for the purpose of political control and corruption. And so were the Iranians basically tricked? Was it planned that this would happen? Or is it just a terrible accident and just a very, very unfortunate situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, you can imagine that in these 4 decades, ever since I was plunged into the scene of Iranian politics and opposition politics and what have you, I had discussions with many Iranians, including many who were the most aggressive opponents of my father's regime, mm-hmm. belonging to the same category of people you just described. And in our conversation, they often said that, we now realize what we didn't know then. Mm. And most of them admit that we made a mistake. But the truth is that it was such a frenzy, it was such a euphoria that you could not have a rational discussion. We had university professors swearing that they saw with their own eyes Khomeini's face in the moon. You're not talking about an uneducated person be subject to some propaganda or brainwashing. This is a university professor saying that. So when the intelligentsia or intellectuals fall into those trappings, they didn't even know what Khomeini really stood for. Nobody had really read his pamphlet, which if you read today, was, this is just some badness behind it. And the whole process, which was extremely opaque, obscure, Khomeini started by saying Islamic Republic, and that's it. And people were called to a referendum without even knowing what it's been proposed, voting in plain view with somebody with a Kalashnikov standing on a barrel, and you had to throw either.
To the person in the comments who's saying he's describing the current state of U.S. universities, yep, he absolutely is. This has been going on for quite a while. And like we Iranians, we've been seeing the signs for quite a long time, and we've been speaking out about it. Again, guys, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, it didn't happen overnight. It's not like people just woke up one day in 1979 and just decided to overthrow the Shah, right? This was the product of decades of infiltration and indoctrination by both communists and Islamists. So you can actually trace the origins of the Islamic Republic. Oh, what's this? Sorry. You can actually trace the origins of the Islamic Republic back to 1941. I've spoken about that in my live stream documentary about the 1979 Islamic Revolution. I mean, I could do another live stream, but it's literally a 4-hour video, guys. So um, I've here. Let me share it again with you guys so you can see it. Or you know what? I'll put a link to it in my live stream after I'm done. But if you just go to my YouTube page and go to my playlist where it says Iranians rate documentaries about Iran, go to the oldest video, the one that has a rating of 3 out of 10 and it's 4 hours long. That's basically, you're gonna, everything that you need to know about the Islamic Revolution and what happened is all right there. So I encourage everyone to go and check that out. But absolutely right, like you're absolutely correct. What's happening right now in the West is exactly what was happening in Iran. And again, it didn't happen overnight. It took almost 40 years for them to gain so much power. And if you missed my live stream Friday night, I did a live stream where I played an interview with someone named Yuri Bezmenov. It's an interview from 1984. He was an ex KGB agent, and he was exposing how the communists have been infiltrating America for a long time. And even back in 1984, when that interview happened in 1984, he was saying that it's already too late and the situation is dire. So that was 1984, 40 years ago. So imagine how much worse it is today.
A green or a red, in plain view. So what I'm trying to say is that as it was evolving, the momentum was such in that frenzy, and mostly instigated by these two groups, that what could have been possibly been done. Some people retrospectively say, well, maybe the regime was too slow to react to that demand. And I'm not saying there were legitimate demands for liberalization. And a lot of honest, genuine liberals at the time were not wrong. And my father actually wanted to do that. Why would you educate a nation knowing that tomorrow they will have more demands and more need for participation? But we should not forget that this was at the time of the Cold War. This is at the time that some of these groups were affiliated during the bidding of a foreign power. The Tudeh party was basically the instrument of intervention in Iran on behalf of Moscow. It was very clear. Maybe in today's generation, they don't quite relate to that era, but that's how things were at the time. Anyway, the point is that as soon as the regime took over, they started to immediately take on the intelligentsia. They closed universities. They threw professors in jail. What I'm saying is that there was a sudden realization that we cannot stay in this country. They were immediately persecuted if they were a religious minority. Baha'is, Jews had to escape. The first exodus of Iranians that came out of Iran and were lucky enough to be able to escape because of their political persuasions or because of their religious beliefs or because they were members of the previous regime. Anyway, there was a massive brain drain that started early on. And it started creating what today you see in terms of the Iranian diaspora and how affluent and capable they are in terms of creativity. Many of them run corporations, industries, medical centers. And that should be, again, a way for whether you're an American or a foreigner looking, okay, who are Iranians? What do they say? What do they think? What are they capable of? In contrast to what this regime is projecting, that's where you can see the contrast. That's what people in Iran today see as a contrast. The children that were on the streets of Iran protesting in latter years, in various moments, they were the ones who are no longer duped. They do their own due diligence.
Yeah.
They do their own research. So there's no more naivete that did exist in 1978, 79 at the time of the revolution.
Do you think that any of the Iranians have any resentment towards the West? Are they blaming the CIA or, or the UK? I mean, is there any of that type of resentment there?
Look, let me give you a tacit example of the expectation that exists in Iran in terms of how can the free world come to our help. During the Green Movement, there were a lot of slogans. It was during the Obama administration. And you could see signs that people were holding in the English language to any camera covering it. Clearly, they were not practicing their linguistic skills. They were trying to send you a message. In fact, they were chanting Obama, Obama, Yaba Una, Yaba Ma, which means either with them or with us. Pick your side. And throughout the years, you saw that the messaging coming from Iran, at a time that there was no social media, which makes it more accessible to see what people actually think, was not covered by foreign media. So it was always in the mindset of dealing with the regime, falling into the trappings of, well, there are more moderate elements rather than the more hardcore. Maybe we can reason with them. Maybe we can have a strategy of behavior change and a policy of trying to cut a deal with them and what have you, while Iranians were getting repressed at home. And I think the biggest reproach that Iranians have towards countries like America or its allies in the Western world is that haven't you yet seen the difference between us and our values and our aspirations, which is the very same thing that you as Americans or French enjoy in terms of liberty and justice and human rights in your countries. And instead of helping us get rid of the regime that is taking all the rights from us, you insist on dealing with them over our head and throw us under the bus every time that we face this crisis. That, I think, is what frustrates many of my compatriots back home. It's just how else are we supposed to defend ourselves unarmed, unequipped against an extremely repressive regime? Why is it that when you know this regime is repressing us at home and is conducting its proxy war abroad, not only you don't put more pressure on them, you reward them by releasing more money to them, which of course is not going to be spent on people in Iran and their economic situation. It's going to be spent on this whole proxy war. And that is adding insult to injury. That's really what I think most Iranians today look upon, why it is that we are being completely ignored and thrown under the bus.
So interesting. Why is it that Iran is involved in proxy wars? Why are they doing this to the world?
Okay, first thing you have to realize is that you're not talking about a conventional government that wants to take care of its citizenry. This was not the objective of Khomeini in the first place. Khomeini simply looked at Iran as a launching pad to export an ideology, to create a modern-day Shiite caliphate, to dominate the region and beyond. In order to do that, you have to be able to use every tool at your disposal in what way you can impose that in the region and beyond. And the proxy war is part of that strategy. And from the very beginning, in fact, the IRGC is mandated in carrying out the arms part of helping that exportation of this ideology around.
And in fact, the Islamic Republic has absolutely nothing to do with Iran. They are anti-Iranian, and when they occupied our country, they changed our flag. That's the flag of Iran up there. They changed it with a flag that says Allahu Akbar in Arabic. It's got like Allah in the middle. So, again, we're Iranian. We speak Persian. We don't speak Arabic. And yet our flag is the flag of our foreign Islamic occupiers, right? Like we're not Arab. There's nothing Arab about us. And this isn't like going after Arabs or anything. Like I have no issue with people of other nationalities or ethnicities or languages, but this is how you can tell that Iran is occupied, because they removed every symbol that relates to Iran. and they've replaced it with Arabic words and an Arabic flag, right? And even the IRGC, it stands for Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So there's absolutely nothing Iranian about the Islamic dictatorship, or nothing Iranian about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And like His Royal Highness said, the Islamic regime is there to use Iran as an ATM, as a launch pad to export Islamic terrorism around the world. And this is why we Iranians, we're sticklers when it comes to differentiating between Iran and the Islamic Republic that's occupying Iran, because the Islamic Republic is incredibly anti-Iranian. They have been murdering us in the name of Allah and Islam and jihad for the last 47 years, and half of them aren't even Iranian. Half of them are like from Iraq or from like Palestine, or like they're from Lebanon or Pakistan, India. Like they're from all over
on the globe. It's in their mission statement. And oddly enough, there's nowhere mentioned the word Iran in that organization. They say it's not an Iranian entity. It's called the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, in support of the regime. Why was it created? And I know the people who are involved in that creation, because they knew that they cannot trust the army. And therefore, they had to create a buffer between the army, and it started very early on, including when the Iran-Iraq war started. And it was supposed to be a guarantee of protecting the regime from a potential military coup against it by the military.
So
so first of all, Kobaka, thank you so much for the super chat and for the support. I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely, this is very important information, because I think it's important for the world to know that the problem in the Middle East is not Iran. The problem is that Islamic jihadi ideology that occupied Iran in 1979 and has been slowly now coming into your countries. And so when your politicians and your media outlets, when they refer to what's happening in occupied Iran, when they say Iran instead of the Islamic Republic, they're actually doing you a disservice, because they are not properly identifying the main source of the problem, right? Because again, the problem isn't Iran or Iranians. Prior to 1979, Iran was actually the biggest ally of the United States. It was only when the Islamic regime took over in 1979 that they, started, chanting death to America and, the great Satan and, all that like jihadi Islamic garbage nonsense. That only started in 1979. Prior to that, we were allies. And so, yeah, your politicians and media are doing you a huge disservice by not calling out the problem for what it is. And unless and until you actually know what the problem is, how are you going to be able to fight back against that? So yeah, there you go. Thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad you're enjoying the live stream.
Second military that is loyal and reports direct.
Sorry, the other thing I also wanted to point out here is that a lot of people, a lot of you are asking, well, if Iranians hate the Islamic dictatorship, why don't they rise up? Why haven't they overthrown it yet? His Royal Highness just answered that question. So when the Islamic dictatorship took over, they created a second army, basically. They created the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is separate from the Iranian military. The Iranian military, the Artish, is severely underfunded, not very well trained, not very well manned. And that's because, like he just said, the dictators were afraid of, a military coup d'etat. So they created a second paramilitary force, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that is loyal only to them. And in fact, many people who are part of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are not even Iranian. They're there's like Pakistanis and, again, like Hezbollah people. There's like Palestinians in there. There's like Iraqis, even like some Nigerians there. So pretty much anyone who is part of that Islamofascist jihadi ideology the Islamic dictatorship takes in and includes as part of their paramilitary. So yeah, the reason why it's difficult for Iranians to overthrow the Islamic dictatorship is because there is literally a well-manned, well-funded, well-armed army that was created specifically to keep the Islamic dictatorship in power. And the actual army has been severely, severely defunded, demanned, de-armed. And of course, everyone who's at the top of the army, basically they were all executed by the Islamic dictatorship, and they were all replaced with their own people. So even the top echelons of the army are basically supporters of the Islamic dictatorship. However, I will say this. One of the things that His Royal Highness is working on is military defections. And from reports, we have heard that there's somewhere between, I don't know, 50,000 to at least 100,000 people who have defected from both the Artish and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And apparently there's something going on in the background. There's something in the works. I don't know what that is, but we are seeing more and more defections coming from both the military and from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So we all have to kind of stick around and stay tuned for that. But yeah, so to answer everyone's questions as to why Iranians haven't been able to overthrow, it's because there's literally an army there whose sole purpose is to murder Iranians who try to rise up and overthrow the Islamic dictatorship.
Directly to the current Islamic regime.
And basically for protecting them by not trusting the military and creating that buffer. What happened, of course, next is that this organization became more and more a mafia-like organization, getting involved in every aspect of control and commerce and business in Iran. So that's why it is an entity that is actually powerful because it's in symbiosis with the regime.
How big is it? How many people work for this IRGC?
It's certainly, if not more than the military, or even if there are some military components, a lot of it is controlled by the IRGC. But it has become a point that they really have a lot of clout. And if you look at every time the regime has been intervening regionally, whether in Syria or even in Lebanon and other places, there's some kind of an IRGC entity involved in that aspect. So you may be funding Hamas or Hezbollah, but there is an element of the IRGC involved in all these characteristics, which brings me to the point of why it is that I think if there's no shift in policy in terms of how do we deal with this regime, how do we weaken this regime, whether it's its proxies or whether it's the regime itself, one of the issues on the table, which I think should be part of that policy, is the IRGC should be sanctioned and placed on a list of terrorist organizations. Some governments are looking at that, finding the legal way to do that.
So someone in the chat asked if people in Iran are allowed to have guns. No, absolutely not. Ordinary civilians are not allowed to own arms because, again, the Islamic dictatorship does not want people to rise up and overthrow them. So this is why I personally am I'm a big supporter and proponent of gun rights. I think it's important that people have the right to bear arms.
But if you do not show the Iranian people that we know the evil work that this regime is doing against you in repression at home and what it's doing in its proxy war, you cannot expect either Iranians at home or our immediate neighbors like the Israelis or the Saudis to think there's an actual means of responding to the regime. And in the meantime, what do we do in dealing with this situation? So it's not just limited to Iran. And why is it that it impacts America at the end of the day? Because I know many times I've heard Americans say, well, it's all the way over there. Why should we be dragged into it anymore? We had a bad experience in Afghanistan. We have a bad experience in Iraq. Once again, as taxpayers, we have to fund all these things. But none of this needs to happen when it comes to Iran. But you cannot hope to have an equal playing field where you don't empower the people of Iran without taking the teeth or the what you call it, the fangs out of this tiger that the regime is. It has to be declawed, literally. So you cannot have a chance of bringing real change in nations that want to have change by continuing to, in fact, reward this regime by giving them more means that they shouldn't have had in the first place. And that's the question that many Iranians ask. It says, you're not punishing the regime, you're in fact emboldening them by giving them more means to carry out their sinister goals.
You bring up the point that many of us Americans are tired of wars. We are also financially in distress. Right now, our borders are porous. We have many problems here in America. And the idea of having to get involved in wars across the globe seems overwhelming as an understatement. And we're not sure if that's really our priority, because our priority has to be to take care of our own right now. And I'm curious, what is your answer to the possibility that we don't engage? What would happen if, we build a border here, we secure our country, we focus on America, and we let the Middle East deal with the Middle East? What would that look like?
Okay. First, I would say that America might say, well, we want to leave them alone. They won't leave you alone. That's the first thing. They're still coming after you.
How?
So by knowing that the biggest success that they can have is to pretty much defeat what they always said from get-go, the great Satan, America, which is why they have always had such a hostile, antagonistic, as an ideological system against the West, represented chiefly by America. But I understand. I'm a taxpayer here. I don't want my money to end up being spent on wasted resources either. But you should not assume that the issue in Iran has to be a war. And let me explain you why. Because the dynamics of change in Iran is a matter of what is the agent for change in Iran. What is the element that can bring down the system? It's no other than the Iranian people themselves. It's your natural army on the ground already, except for they are fighting the fight with no support whatsoever. You won't need to engage America in any kind of conflict. In fact, I would be opposed in principle in any kind of foreign intervention. But I do believe that if you bring in the necessary element of pressure on the regime, equaling the playing field for Iranians, you don't have to do anything much more than that, because the rest will be done by the people themselves. But we need to have a major shift in policy that has yet to exist in the Western world, because they're still in the mindset of cutting a deal and compromise and expecting behavior change, which was a flawed expectation to begin with, and simply proves there's a great deal of naivete in understanding that the DNA of this regime is one that it cannot be compatible and coexisting in the world as we know it. Because in their view, it's either you or them. There's no gray area.
Very true. Like you cannot negotiate with terrorists whatsoever. And I hope that American policymakers are slowly starting to wake up to that fact. Now, many of you have asked me to play Tulsi Gabbard's speech, where she speaks about radical Islamism and that threat. You've asked me to play that and give my thoughts on that. I will be doing that tomorrow. So if you join me for my live stream tomorrow, I will go over her speech. I haven't watched it yet, because I know you guys enjoy when I kind of just do a blind watch and sort of give my reaction as I'm watching it and give my thoughts on it. So I've refrained from watching it. I'm going to watch it tomorrow during the live stream. So if you're enjoying the live stream, make sure that you like and subscribe to my channel and you turn on notifications. My live streams are usually at 12 noon. However, tomorrow I'm also going to be starting a little bit later because I have an appointment at 12 noon. So I'll probably be starting closer to maybe 2 p.m. Eastern, not sure, but I'll put a notification in my YouTube, like with an upcoming live stream, so you guys will see it anyway. But I will be playing Tulsi Gabbard's speech tomorrow on radical Islamism. I've heard it's good. So I'm excited to watch that and give my thoughts on that. In the last few minutes here, because we're reaching the 2-hour mark, and then I have to switch over, or not have to. I will be switching over because I want to the members only live stream, and we're going to have a members only watch party for all of our paid channel members. So in the last few minutes before I end my live stream, I'm going to be playing the beginning of another speech by His Royal Highness King Reza Pahlavi, where he speaks about the threat of radical Marxism and radical Islamism. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Western civilization, and the United States in particular, is at risk. I say this because this is exactly what happened to my country 45 years ago. Iran, you might say, was the testing grounds for what my late father called the unholy alliance of the red and the black, radical Marxism and radical Islamism. These two ideologies converged not to create, but to destroy. Indeed, to destroy the very notion of Iran. As the Ayatollah Khomeini himself, upon his return to Iran, said, "Patriots are of no use to us. We need Muslims. Islam is opposed to nationalism, because nationalism means we want a nation, nationhood, and not Islam." He quickly put his ideology into action. Our National Consultative Assembly became the Islamic Consultative Assembly. Our conventional National Army was shunned in favor of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The lion and sun symbol, which adorned our national flag for centuries, was replaced with Allahu Akbar. This united front of Marxists and Islamists took hold of my homeland, but was never satisfied with just taking over Iran, as these two ideologies do not believe in the concept, much less the border of a nation. Indeed, the Islamic Republic in Iran does not view itself as defending or limited to the borders of the Millat, or the Iranian nation, but rather the Ummat, or the Islamic Brotherhood. This expansion has gone far beyond the Middle East. Every day, we see graphic, distressing images of the consequences this regime's expansion has brought all the way to Europe and the West. From looting universities that were once the envy of the world, to supporting terrorist cells taking hold in Europe, to attempting to annihilate Israel, to expanding its criminal footprint to Latin America. This is not an accident. This is the Islamic Republic's political strategy. I invite you to read yesterday's statement and...
Okay, so we're going to stop it there. That's a speech that His Royal Highness King Reza Pahlavi, the leader of the Iranian opposition to overthrow the Islamic dictatorship. This is a speech that he gave, I believe it was last summer, at the National Conservative Convention. So I have played this speech in like my older live streams, but what I'm going to do is tomorrow, before we play Tulsi Gabbard's speech, where she speaks about, I'm assuming she's speaking about radical Islamism in the United States, I'm going to play this one first. I'm going to play the entire speech so that you guys can see how we Iranians have been trying to warn the West and warn Americans about the threat of the Islamic Republic and how that is destabilizing your countries. So tune in tomorrow. I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Appreciate all of your support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And for those of you who are channel members, I will see you shortly in the members only after party live stream there. So I'll probably do that in about 15 minutes. Just gonna go grab a coffee. Yeah, I will see you guys soon. And for all the rest of you, thank you so much for joining. I will be doing an evening live stream tonight, watching a documentary or two. So look forward to seeing you all then. And as always, Payande Iran Javid Shah.